This is the Halftime Show with Omar Al-Duri on Pulse 95.
It sure is that time. It's the Halftime Show with Omar Al-Duri. I am your host, covering everything sport, international and local. Shout out to everyone who is tuned in and spending this fine Saturday afternoon with me, whether you're in New York, Florin, whether you're in India, Masood, whether you're in the UK, Ashraf, whether you're just here in the UAE, chilling with us like Murad, Isa, and Laka as well. Thank you very much for connecting with us. Coach Lisa is on the show. Yeah, there she is. You can see her live on YouTube at the moment. Coach Lisa, how you doing?
I'm very well. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here today.
It's nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you as well.
Just for everyone listening, this is the first time we've met in person, but I've been following your stuff and I'm super fan of what you do. You do quite a lot of things. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you do?
Absolutely. So I am a nutrition coach. That's my main thing. But I also do a lot of fitness stuff and just in general. I'm originally from Germany. I have lived in New Zealand for quite some time, for about 9 years of my life. But for the last 3 years, I've been traveling a lot and enjoy meeting people from all over the world.
New Zealand must have been amazing.
It was absolutely beautiful country. Very isolated though, so that made me want to leave it, basically.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Among the things that I saw on your profile, which is something that a lot of people talk about nowadays, was hormones. Can you tell us a little bit about hormones? And then I'm going to throw a couple of things your way, and I want you to link the emotions to the hormones. Is that cool?
Yeah.
So tell us more about hormones.
So one of the reasons why I got interested in hormones was because sometimes, even when we technically think we're doing everything right with nutrition, we're having struggles because our hormones are out of whack. It affects every area of our life. And so I just wanted to learn more about it. And essentially, it has helped me so much to impact my clients on a broader way, I guess, on a broader spectrum. Absolutely.
And now, when it comes down to hormones, the importance and the magnitude of it can affect us in everyday life.
100%.
One of the things that especially the pandemic has brought to us, individuals and collective, is stress.
Yes.
Which hormone connects to stress and how do we counter that?
Yes, so we're starting with one of the biggest ones at this time, actually, cortisol. So I'm sure most people have heard of cortisol, and unfortunately so many of us are basically struggling from a cortisol overload at the moment. When it comes to stress, you have to understand that your body cannot differentiate between this is emotional stress, this is training stress, this is life stress. It just feels stress.
Yeah.
So what it can trigger is response in your body, basically. So if your body is overly stressed, it does not want to focus on other things like I'm going to let go of weight, or I'm going to feel safe enough so I can reproduce, that kind of thing. So that results into people struggling with basically not being able to conceive, with pretty much not having sleep disturbances, those kinds of things, and of course struggling to lose weight as well. So a cortisol overload is one of the biggest things out there. And yeah, as you say, one hormone affects all the other ones because our body produces more than 50 different hormones.
Wow.
And so it doesn't just have an impact on that, but also on testosterone, on progesterone, on hunger hormones, everything else.
Absolutely. And you said something that was really interesting there, that it affects a bunch of things. But one of the things people struggle with normally, especially through fight or flight, is recognizing where they're at, what balance they need.
Yes.
How does one counter cortisol and even the levels of stress?
Oh, yeah. if I had the magic formula to that would be amazing.
Yeah.
In the end, it comes down to so many different things. Managing small, quote unquote, smaller stressors better. So for instance, work stress, like not letting things get to you so much, or implementing small things like meditation techniques, breathing exercises, those kinds of things. And then on the other end of the spectrum might be training stressors, because so many people think, but I'm loving my training, it's so much fun, I feel awesome afterwards. When they, beat themselves up in the gym, they might do CrossFit 6 times a week or 5 times a week or even other things.
Yeah.
But what they don't recognize is that that can be an extra stressor on your body too. So figuring out the training frequency, training intensity that really plays well for your cortisol levels is super important, because some cortisol is good. We do want to stress our body to a small extent, but only to an extent where it can recover from, so that we see the optimal adaptations. If we stress it too much, it's like a stress fracture, essentially, basically.
Yeah. Good question coming in here. Is there a way to identify an excess in cortisol other than getting tested?
Yes. So there would be a lot of what we call biofeedback indicators. So, for instance, some people might be waking up several times a night, for example, especially, it sounds super random, but especially between the hours of 2 and 4, you might wake up and just feel widest awake, and then in the morning you struggle to get up, and in the evening you're wide awake again. So like your cortisol rhythm, which you should be wide awake in the morning and then slowly tapering off, getting more tired towards the end of the day, that's the ideal rhythm. But if your cortisol levels are off, then that's all going to be out of whack. So that's an indication. For women, if your cycle is out of whack, that's a pretty good indication. For men, on the other side, if your testosterone level is super, super low, which unfortunately we're seeing a lot in today's society. Overall speaking, testosterone levels are lower than ever. For instance, so that's a big one, and then there's a lot of different indications, like being overly fatigued, for example, as well. All in the afternoon or so, appetite, and again, not seeing the weight loss that you want, although you're technically doing everything right. That could be another one.
Oh, really cool. I mean, and we went from stress as the first hormone, which is kind of a heavy hormone, to happiness.
Yes.
Now, when it comes to happiness, which hormone do you link to happiness, and what can we do to keep that up?
So there's a couple different ones which we can link to that. Of course, I mean, most people have heard of endorphins. You get them from anything that, like you might have a good training session and afterwards you feel awesome, that kind of thing. But then the other one that has become more and more popular is dopamine. And that has been more kind of been brought like into connection with things that give us pleasure. So like eating that sugary treat, or even nowadays social media. So if you, like they say, social media is a little bit addictive, right? You want those likes. Why do we pick up our phone first thing in the morning, or why do we struggle leaving it on the side? Because we want that recognition, we want that dopamine hit, and that includes all our senses, and it includes the colors that come from that social media, but it also comes from just tastes and anything else. So while there's a good happiness, we need to also make sure that it doesn't become addictive. Like with anything, like a little bit of ice cream is fine, but how much of it is good enough? And I think what most people struggle with these days is recognizing that social media or like any technology exposure needs to be limited and moderated just as well as ice cream or fries or whatever.
Absolutely. There you go, folks. From stress to ice cream, all in one segment. And we're going to come back straight after the break. So make sure you stay tuned on the only place to be at 3, the Halftime Show on Pulse 95.
This is the Halftime Show with Omar Al-Duri on Pulse 95.
Sure is that time, and we're in that kind of vibe today. Great energy here in the studio with Coach Lisa. We're having a good time. We're talking about all sorts of things, from hormones to nutrition to all sorts of good stuff. And if you're tuned in and you just came in the room now on Instagram Live at Omar Al-Duri, or even on YouTube, and you're wondering, what have I missed? Don't worry, you can catch your shows on Apple, Spotify, SoundCloud if you like a podcast, or even head over to our YouTube and watch the whole episode from scratch in the convenience of your own home, anytime, anyplace, anywhere. Right, Coach Lisa, how you doing?
Very well, thank you.
We started off on a high.
Oh, yes.
We started off on a high. We were talking about hormones and linking emotions to hormones with stress and happiness. And we had a few questions in as well. And one of the questions was... where is it here? They're still talking about Arsenal. Is there a connection with cortisol and adrenal fatigue?
Yes, absolutely.
Can you tell us what they are?
So adrenal fatigue is like basically most doctors or most medical practitioners don't actually really diagnose it per se, but from a consistent overload of cortisol, we can get something like what we call adrenal fatigue. So basically just you're struggling to get out in the morning, not just to the extent of like, oh, I'm a little bit tired. It's really more like 3 days you can't get out at all. So it's like your adrenals have actually taken a hit. And that comes from cortisol overload over long periods of time.
Very interesting. And one of the things that a lot of us tend to struggle with is managing hormones. Is there a way to balance dopamine, serotonin, and cortisol, not just from a physical point of view, but from a psychological point of view as well?
Yeah, I mean, not just those three hormones, but as we said, like all hormones are interconnected and connected to your overall health, whether that is mental health, physical health, and so on. So we're going to get into more of the advice later on. I think that was going to be one of the next things to talk about, how to actually manage them.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think we're just going to save that question a little bit for later on.
Okay.
And yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, what can we do to help manage our hormones?
Yeah, I mean, so same sort of thing. I'm happy to dive into that right away. So basically, there are several things that play a very important role. Number one would be eating enough. That's one of the big things, actually. Dieting for long periods of time. So a lot of people say like, oh, I've been on a diet basically since I was 15, yo-yo dieting on and off, on and off and off. That is one of the worst things you can do for your hormones. So that is why I recommend periodizing your nutrition, having your phases where you just maintain and then having a weight loss phase. There's absolutely nothing wrong with wanting to lose weight. Yeah. It just needs to be in a controlled manner. So eating enough. Then the second point would be sleeping enough. Lack of sleep, anything less than 6-7 hours on a consistent basis. I'm not talking like once a week, but on a consistent basis, that's going to have a negative impact on your hormones. Then thirdly, of course, quality of food. Again, nothing wrong with an occasional treat, but we want 80 to 90% of your food to be wholesome food, nutrient-dense food, and then you're going to be nourishing your body with that as well. And amongst that, if you are on a very low-fat diet, that's also not a good thing, because out of the 3 macronutrients, which again we will get more into later on, healthy fats are the second most important thing you can do after eating enough food in terms of nutrition. So healthy fats would be things like avocado, whole eggs, olive oil, nuts, seeds, good quality meat potentially if you like to eat meat, good quality fish, for instance, salmon, and so on. All of these things are amazing for your hormones because your body needs good quality fats for hormone production. Yeah. So those would be some easy entry points. And the last one out of those easy entry points, again, is managing your stress better. So if you always work 12, 16-hour work days and it's constantly go, 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 and then you come home and you're stressed there, and then you go to training and that's stress there, that is too much for your system overall. Technically, we do want to balance our sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system so that we have a good balance. So, whether that is including a 5-minute meditation every day, dialing it down a little bit in your training, or making sure you're coming home after a 10, 12-hour workday at least, that would be ideal.
Fantastic. And you see, a lot of the times everyone loves a hack, and we've heard about things like you mentioned earlier, like meditation or even breath work. But any hacks to manage our hormones apart from that can help us reset our body?
I would love to give you like a super, take that pill and so on, and it's going to be better. But unfortunately, there is no hack. If I had to really boil it down to 3 things, it would be 7 hours of sleep, it would be eating sufficient amount of food, and it would be including something that brings you down. So that could be, it doesn't have to be meditation. Meditation is not for everybody, but it could be going out into the sunlight more often and just enjoying a little bit of a walk. It can be playing with your kids more often. So like doing more things that calm you down, that bring you joy, and take you away from the stress.
Fantastic. I love the way you simplified that but in the simplicity can be the intricate part, which we often don't do.
Yeah, the intricate part, and also the important thing is the individualized part, because just because something works for this person doesn't mean that it works for you. You know, like a lot of people say like, oh, I've tried journaling, I've tried meditation and so on, and it doesn't do anything for me. And that's fair enough. You know, it's not for everybody, but as long as you find something that works for you, that's the important thing.
Fantastic. Benoit asks a question. He said, does fasting reset your body?
Oh, that's a very good question. And I mean, it kind of has to do with hormones. And I would like to connect that to the last thing that I said, which is it is very, very much dependent on the person. So for some people, I will say especially women tend to be more hormone and insulin sensitive. Fasting can actually be something not so great because it can increase your anxiety level, it can make you feel more brain fogged and so on. And they tend to do better with more frequent, smaller meals throughout the day. Whereas some other people can really benefit from fasting and they feel clarity in their head. They like 1 or 2 large meals in the day and it works better with their routine as well. So there is no scientific proof that, you know, you have to fast 20 hours a day. Like with intermittent fasting, I know that's like all the hype at the moment, and it can be a great method for some, but then there's going to be others, for them it's not going to work at all.
Fantastic. That, I promised you, it was going to be a good show. And we've got more coming up next on the only place to be at 3, the Halftime Show on Pulse 95.
This is the Halftime Show with Omar Al-Duri on Pulse 95.
Yes, we are back. Hope you're enjoying the show today. I know you love it when I put my intro, Benoit, and it's not every day I get Coach Lisa in the studio, so we're taking advantage out of getting as much information out of this genius here with me in the studio today. It's fantastic to have you, Coach Lisa. How are you doing? That's 2 segments down already.
Yeah, it's awesome. Time's flying by.
It's absolutely flying by. We spoke about hormones and managing hormones. Now, macronutrients, and among these things, you touched it a little bit earlier when it comes down to the stigma behind it. Some people say too much fat is not good for you. Some people say stay away from the carbs. Some people even say, hey, you need to load up on your protein. So there's so many different contrasting opinions when it comes down to macronutrients. Everyone wants to lose weight or be lean or gain muscle, but how can one do that without restriction?
Yeah, right. So I guess connecting it to what we spoke about previously, which was one of the pointers was to be eating enough for most people. And what I mean by that, so eating enough is pretty much, you know, eating enough calories or as many calories as you're burning technically. So that would be maintaining your weight. If we want to lose weight, we should be eating a little bit less calories than what we're burning. And that's why I said if you want to take focus on your hormones, not to be dieting for too long. But anyway, so how can you figure out what your maintenance calories are or where your calorie deficit is really? So there's a few different methods to go about it. And basically, first point would be there are actually a lot of online calculators for your calories, for like how many calories should I be consuming if I want to lose a little bit of weight. And mind you, there is a lot of false or not so ideal ones out there. But the majority of them, I would just encourage you to go on Google and just literally type in, you know, macronutrient or calorie calculator and see if they should all come roughly to a similar number. They're going to take into account how tall you are, how much you currently weigh, how old you are, your activity level, and so on. And so I would suggest at first use one of the apps that allow you to log your food intake for a little while, just for awareness sake. And you might say, tracking my food intake, that's so much extra work. I don't want to record everything that I eat in an app. Well, first of all, we use apps all the time. So, you know, what's another 5 minutes on an app per day? And second of all, look at it as a experiment on yourself. You know, for like a week or 2 weeks, just see roughly how much you're eating. You might be totally underestimating what you're eating, right? You think like, oh, it's just, a piece of toast and some peanut butter. And then turns out you forgot to account for the cream in your coffee. You forgot to account that it's actually, 2 tablespoons here and the oil that you're using to cook this and that and so on. And then in the end, you realize, okay, I'm actually eating 3,000 calories. I never had any idea. No wonder that I'm actually gaining weight, right? So that would be my point number 1. Discover where you are at right now. And then from there, see, okay, maybe I just reduce that for a little bit and I'm gonna maintain or like look at my weight every day and see what happens just for a week or 2. And if it goes down a little bit, then okay, you're probably gonna be in a deficit. And it could be as simple as reducing some things, like small things, as I said, maybe just halving or cutting the number of oil that you use in your cooking in half, or swapping something that's really calorie dense, like maybe you have some nuts or something like that for your afternoon snack, maybe just swapping that for an apple. And as you can see, there's absolutely nothing wrong with nuts, but just from tracking you will figure out what are some really calorie dense foods. And because you might be thinking, oh, I'm eating so clean. Lots of people come to me and they say, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I'm eating only healthy things. I have like a piece of cake once a month or, whatever. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. There's plenty of healthy foods that are calorie dense. And the reality is, even if you eat only clean foods, you can be gaining weight. And the other reality is, even if you include a piece of cake here and there, if you include a couple of slices of pizza every now and then, you can be losing weight. And that's exactly what I try to teach. A, that balance, and B, just learning what's actually in your food. And so, okay, we have touched on finding out your maintenance calories, finding out how to reduce that a little bit to go into a weight loss phase. And now the question basically, why do I even want to pay attention to the distribution of carbs, fats, and protein? So the reason for that is that even if you are in a calorie deficit and you start losing weight, you don't want to end up looking what we call skinny fat. Everybody has seen those people, they lose weight and they just look, I always like to say, like deflated. So they look like somebody pulled a little bit of air out and they look smaller, but they have no shape. We want to make sure that we retain or maintain or even build lean body mass. Even as women or as a woman, you might not want to look bulky, which is understandable, but you still want to look toned, you want to look firm, right? You want to have some nice shapes going on as opposed to just looking smaller. So basically that is why it's important for us to consider protein intake. And then the other point with carbs and fats is a little bit more individual, but I've already touched on why fats are important, why we do want to make sure we're getting enough healthy fats, because they are one of the most important things for hormonal health. And then with carbs can be great for you too. So the fear mongering of, oh, you need to be on a low carb diet, or carbs are always bad, bread is bad, rice is bad, and so on, cannot be generalized, in my opinion. It very much depends on your activity level, and even as such, like even if you're reasonably sedentary and you're not working out too much, a little bit of carbs here and there is not bad at all, as long as you work it into your daily total. My third recommendation, after I guess figuring out your maintenance calories, then reducing that a little bit into a calorie deficit, and then thirdly would be setting up your protein, carbs, and fats according to your goal, basically. So with protein, and this is going to sound super technical, but with protein, we want to make sure that it's somewhere between 0.7 to 1.2 gram per pound of body weight. And you don't need to overthink that too much. And for most people, it's going to be somewhere around about 30% of their daily calories. And so, again, we don't need to be tracking our food intake forever with an app or whatnot, but it can just help you figure out what is actually a good protein source, because we hear so many different things. Some people say, oh, nuts are a great protein source. And then you realize, oh, a hand of nuts, might have 3 grams of protein, which is not even that much to begin with, but it also has 500 calories. So it's really very little, quote unquote, bang for your buck in terms of protein, as opposed to chicken breast, which, a handful might have 200 calories, and most of that is going to be protein. And even on the plant-based section or side, other things like people might not know that there's a little bit of protein in broccoli, or, it's just look at it as a learning experience and not just I need to get to this and that goal weight.
Yeah.
And just to finish that off with your question, how can we lose weight without restriction? So unfortunately, the sad truth is there has to be some restriction somewhere here and there, just because food is available to us 24/7, and food is designed, or modern food is designed for us to want to overeat on it. There is so much temptation everywhere, you know, like you will have figured out that if you eat that pizza, if you eat that cake, it's so hard to stop. And that's not due to your fault or because you have lack of willpower. It is simply because the sugar and whatever is in that food is increasing your cravings and is making it so hard for you to stop. So we need to somehow restrict the quantity, and also kind of restrict the unhealthy foods. But again, like I said, I think a really good general guideline is like 80% whole foods, 20% something flexible. And that's what I really encourage, you know, like if you want to have that cookie with your afternoon coffee, that's totally fine. Just make sure it doesn't turn into sugary breakfast and then having 2 pieces of chocolate after your lunch as well, and then after dinner some ice cream. That's too much overall, right?
Yeah.
So finding that 80-20 balance, that's really what it kind of comes down to.
Fantastic. Plenty of questions coming in, and I'm going to hold you to come after the break so I can answer those questions for you with none other than Coach Lisa. Thank you so much. So far, so good, and it's fantastic. Can't wait to get some more on the only place to be at 3, the Halftime Show on Pulse 95.
This is the Halftime Show with Omar Al-Duri on Pulse 95.
Yes, we are back, and we're back quick because I wanted to make sure I get to ask her all the questions that have been coming in. Thank you very much for everyone who's contributed today. And you know what? If I was listening to the show as well, I'll be sending a lot of questions in as well. So Coach Lisa is in the building and offering us a lot of insight actually on something we haven't had on the show before. Hormones, talking macros, so much good stuff on here. A couple of questions coming in, Lisa, which is, have thyroid problems become a buzzword these days, or has there actually been an increase in people with thyroid issues?
Oh, that's a very, very good question. I like that. There has actually been an increase, and that is because, as I said, all hormones are linked, and mostly the first one what we spoke about, which is cortisol. So cortisol and thyroid are super, super closely linked, and so with the increase in cortisol overload, we have seen a lot more thyroid problems. Of course, it might also just be that people are more aware of it and like reporting it more and going to their doctor about it more, but it seems like there has been an increase for sure.
Yeah, there's another question here, Lara, adding to that. If someone is diagnosed with hypothyroidism, is there a natural way maybe to get rid of it without taking any medicine?
Oh, yeah, also a good question. So I would say if you have all the bases covered that I spoke about initially, you know, if you can say you're really sleeping a good amount of hours every single day, you're really focusing on whole foods and so on, that would be my absolute number one. And then there is additional things that you can always do to help your thyroid as well. For example, really making sure you're purchasing most fruits and vegetables organic in order to minimize pesticide exposure. Reducing plastic in your household, for instance, that's a big one. And then minimizing things like parabens and silicones and stuff in your skincare products and your cleaning products, because those three things, so plastic, pesticides, and parabens, they have a huge impact on, well, not huge, but they have a big ability to impact your hormonal profile because they can actually mimic your estrogen in your body, and so throwing that out of whack. So that would be step number 2. And then after that, it really comes down to kind of looking at it more on an individual basis. So some people with hypothyroidism, they might do better with kind of like a paleo-ish diet, so really avoiding some things like dairy and gluten and stuff, but that is very individual, so would have to look at that a little bit closer.
Great answers. Florence says, I consume about 3,000 calories a day, but also start my day with a run and burn 800 to 2,500 per run. I also try and limit my hormone intake by reducing my animal products. Awesome. Megan says, what about reverse dieting?
Oh, yes.
Good question, Megan.
I love that. there's a few reasons basically why somebody might want to consider a reverse diet. So one of them we kind of talked about earlier. If you have been dieting for the last, I don't know how long, you basically jump from one diet to another, and now your energy intake is so low. So let's say you're down to consuming 1,200 calories almost every day, well, for a long period of time, and you have stopped losing weight. So this could be one of the main reasons why you want to reverse diet. So basically bringing up your metabolism, healing your metabolism so that in the future you can diet again on higher calories, and so that your body actually receives the message, hey, there's plenty of food around, you can start ramping up that metabolism again. And the other reason, of course, for a reverse diet is after a diet, as I said, we don't want to be dieting for too long. So rather than just jumping from your diet back to your previous eating habits, we want to slowly bring that up, and that process is called reverse dieting. So I'm a big fan of it for sure.
Excellent. Now, we've heard, again, so many different things regarding protein per body weight. What's your take on that?
So one of the things I mentioned earlier is roughly between 0.7 to 1.2 grams of protein per pound of body weight is advised for most people. There is a lot of wiggle room to that. So if somebody would say, hey, I'm not really that interested in looking super lean, I really just want to be at my healthiest, we're going to keep it at the lower end. If somebody is wanting to lose weight, they're active, they kind of want to really tone up, then I'm going to push that up a little bit more. If someone also says for, religious or even just ethical reasons, I really want to avoid eating animal protein, and including fish, including eggs and stuff, I don't want to eat that either, then it's going to be rather tricky getting that higher end of protein. Still, we want to keep it at about 0.7 grams, just so that, again, we fuel up that metabolism and actually end up looking decent still. Yeah,
fantastic. I think most of the time you probably hear a scenario like, I want to lose weight, I'm overweight at the moment now, and I want to feel better. What's the three things you would advise those people to do?
It depends how overweight they would be. So if someone comes to me with basically the diet looking pretty terrible in terms of whole foods. So let's say they eat out all the time, most of the food is processed stuff, I would really just start focusing on quality, and simply by cleaning up their food, we're going to see a good amount of progress. And the reason why I would start there is, without changing those underlying habits, we're not going to make any long-term changes, right? Even if that person goes into a calorie deficit but eats crap all the time, they're going to continue feeling like crap, even if it's less calories and they are seeing weight loss. And then the other question was, I just want to feel better as well, right? So there's many aspects to that. Again, I would ask a lot of questions in terms of stress, in terms of sleep, in terms of hydration. I think water intake or hydrating properly is one of the most overlooked things in general, for sure. So that would be a good place to start as well. And just, again, like, are you really eating 80-90% whole foods? There's so much energy coming from good quality food, as opposed to those sugary foods that leave you falling into an energy crash, and then at the end of the day, you're just making it through the day with caffeine.
Fantastic. Coach Lisa, you have punched above your weight today, but it's excellent. Really, really good content. Before I let you go, where can we follow you?
On Coach Lisa _TCM, so Tailored Coaching Method is what it stands for. On Instagram is where I'm most active, and I try to put out a lot of good content for my followers.
Absolutely, 100% good content. Thank you so much for gracing us on the Halftime Show. It's my pleasure. I hope you guys have enjoyed the show as much as I have. Remember, you can catch it every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, 3 to 4, and that's me and Coach Lisa. We're out for the day, but I hope you have a great day. Coach Lisa, thank you.
If you liked this episode of The Halftime Show, drop a like and subscribe.
95.
Be sure to follow us on Instagram for all our daily updates and top stories.